Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. In today's video I want to tell you the story of how I won the respect of a candidate master. So as you can see on the screen, my opponent's rating is 2131. That's a pretty big rating, when we're talking about FIDE rating and all of that. And when I tell you that I want his respect, what do I mean by that? Well, I am an unrated player, and up until this point I had 0 out of 8. I managed to get him in time trouble, and I managed to get a very good position against him. The game lasted for 54 moves, but I was essentially lost on move 40. But the fact that I lasted 40 moves against him made him get my respect. I did not fall for any tricks, and also I was very careful and very accurate with my play, and you will see in the game what I mean by that. So without further ado, let's talk about the game, and you will see the moment that he told me that I went wrong. So he opened up with d4. I went for knight f6, and as you can see, if you've watched my other video, you know what I'm going to play. So he played c4, I played c5. The modern Benoni will be on the board again. So we have e takes d5, c takes d5, and now d6. But this time, my opponent, he plays e4 instead of g3 and going for a non-standard fianchetto. So he went for e4, and I went for g6, the normal, like the standard Benoni stuff. He went for knight g2 e2, and I went for bishop g7. We basically developed, and here he went for knight to g3. He wanted to guard the king side a little bit more, knowing that I was probably going to attack on there, and you will see that this knight will do a great job. I castled, and he played bishop e2. I played rook e8, putting pressure against the e-pawn. It's not under attack at the moment, but maybe sometime in the future. He went for castles, I went for a6 and a4. This is a very standard pawn structure. Basically white stops black from ever pushing b5, but at some point you will push b5. Knight b to d7, I'm making space for my rook on b8, bishop f4, and now the d6 pawn is under attack, so I protect it. Knight e5, we have queen d2, going for that h6 square, and here I really spent a lot of time calculating, and I went for bishop g4. No, I wanted to either trade bishops or force out an f3 move from him. He went for f3, so I went back, bishop to d7, and here he went bishop to g5, pinning my knight. Here, he could have probably went for bishop to h6, although bishop to h6 bishop to h6 is not that good of a move here, because I can simply allow him to capture. For example, let's play rook b8. I can simply allow him to capture, and this knight cannot jump anywhere. H5 and f5 are taken, and he doesn't actually have an attack here. Okay, he might play moves like f4, but I can just play knight to g4 and knight back to h6, and he has no attack. He has absolutely no attack. But bishop g5, what bishop g5 does, it disrupts my knight from going to g4 and h6, because then he would just take it. So let me present you with an example. And if here I went rook b8, he would have went for f4, knight g4, h3, and after knight to h6, now he would have had this very annoying f5 maneuver. And now how do I guard my knight? That's the question, and the answer is not very clear. I cannot see a way of guarding the knight. Maybe there is, maybe there was. Maybe I should have moved the king and then brought the knight back, but that's just very annoying, and that would have been very passive. So here, for example, if I move my king. Not here, if I move my king, that would have just been very passive. So instead of that, I went for bishop back to c8. So after bishop g5, I went bishop back to c8, acknowledging that maybe bishop to c7 was not the best, d7 was not the best move. I went back to c8, and here he played rook a to e1. I played queen to c7, king to h1, and now rook b8. and after this rook b8, he finally went for the f4 plan. I went back, knight e to d7, and here he went for e5. I went for d captures on e5 and f captures on e5. And here basically I could have probably just played knight h5 and then, you know, knight captures, pawn captures, bishop captures, but you know, this would have been just a better position for him. Although I would have grabbed this pawn, I mean, he has a lot of pressure against the king side, and I did not want to go into this variation. But the variation that I'm gonna go into is perhaps even worse. We have rook takes on e5. This comes with an exchange sacrifice after bishop f4. But it did not matter. I played queen b6 and he played bishop takes on e5. I took with the knight, and here he played the queen to f4. And now I had to guard my knight. If I move my knight, then where do I move it? If I move it back, then I mean, my bishop is not seeing daylight again, and it's just a very, very bad position. Passive, and I didn't like that. So I went for queen to d6, and here he went knight g to e4, attacking my rook. I, of course, exchanged one pair of knights, and here I went for rook d8. If I took the pawn, then he would have probably either attacked my queen or played something very annoying, such as maybe knight f6 check, forcing me to give up this beautiful dark square bishop, and then he would have attacked me. It doesn't matter what. I should just retreat with my knight, because bishop to f3 with a double attack is coming. And although I mean this position is very much playable, I cannot attack his queen because of queen d8 check, and there are, you know, the position I felt was very, very bad. Exchange down, I would not want to play a position like this. I just didn't want to play a position like this, that's all. So I went for queen back to d8, and here he grabbed the free pawn, knight c5. And now I played bishop f5, you know, I just developed a piece to maybe threatening knight d3 in the future, and he went for bishop f3, now he's guarding his d5 pawn. And here I went for a little bit of a trap. I wouldn't say it's a trap, but it is a very tricky move. I played rook to c8, and here in the game he took the pawn, but for example, this pawn is free, but what could have he done otherwise? I mean, my knight is defended, and okay, he could give, for example, up to back the exchange, but it's not a good move, and he will do that later. So let's see what happened in the game. We have knight takes on b7, and now we have queen to b6, and now you see the idea. Right, he doesn't have a square for his knight to retreat to, and in this position he could have played d6, but he chose not to. I did not know exactly why, but I think one of the reasons was knight into d3, forking the rook and the queen. And now where do you move your queen? You have to move your queen somewhere. Let's say maybe queen to g5 is an option. And now after knight takes on e1 and rook takes on e1, now I can perhaps activate my pieces. You know, queen captures on b2 might be a possibility, but you know, there's always this lurking threat of d7, and maybe some things will happen here. I don't know, but he didn't like this, so he went instead, after queen b6, he went for rook takes on e5. And I had calculated this, it was fine. Bishop takes on e5, queen takes, and queen takes on b7. And now basically I am down a pawn, and he has this very nice d pawn, so he pushes it. We have d6. Here you have to stop the pawn. I played queen to d7. He played queen to d4, and here I played rook to d8, attacking the pawn. But now g4, kicking my bishop back. Bishop e6, and now queen f6. He just puts his queen on a very nice square, and of course you cannot take the d pawn, as you know, if queen takes, then just the rook to d1, and you win the rook. There's simply no square. And okay, I could have given up, for example, my queen for two pieces here, but it doesn't matter, because Now at some point I will either run out of checks, or just simply the position would be bad. Of course he would, I mean, it doesn't matter where he goes, and here it doesn't matter if I take another pawn or if I check him because the b pawn is guarded. So I just didn't want to go into this variation because it seemed very, very bad. So instead, after queen f6, I went for bishop b3. And this bishop b3 maneuver, I felt it was pretty good, and it actually is pretty good. And here he went for rook e1. Again, now I cannot take the pawn because of rook e8 check. Rook e8 check, rook captures queen, captures queen, and now the position is actually much worse than in the previous case. At least in the previous case I had the bishop and the rook for a queen. Now I just have a rook for a queen. So here I played rook to f8 after this rook to e1 maneuver, and here he played h4. He basically wanted to start attack on the king side, and here is where he gets kind of low on time. So here he has like 5 minutes, and I have more minutes than he has, and I play h5. I think a very important move. And the thing with h5 is basically if he, let's say, takes on h5, now I have queen to h3 check. He has to go king to g2. Now I can check him one more time, and if he goes to f1, I have a check with the bishop, and I can show that actually. I have a check with the bishop, and then he's forced to either block, and then we trade, and then, or if he blocks, I can just for example check him here and again until I force him over to the e file, and when he's on the e file, then rook to e8 check is just devastating. It's actually losing the game. Now I win the bishop, and I'm actually winning the game now. So instead of this, he did not capture. Here he went for rook to g1 instead, and I can just leave the tension here because again, if he captures, now it's actually mate in 1. So I went bishop takes a4, and again, if he captures, it's just mate in 1. So here he went for rook to g2. Very solid move, and here I went for queen to e6. Now I want to trade queens. Of course he didn't want to, so he played queen to c3. And now, as you know, his piece is, he doesn't have an attack anymore. I decided to just grab the g4 pawn, as now g takes on h5 is a possibility, because queen to h3 does not come with any threats. So I just played h takes on g4, and now he took with the rook. I played rook to c8 attacking the queen, and now he went for queen to d4. And in this position, the computer actually evaluates my position as slightly better. And here I should have just went for rook to c1 check, king to h2, and rook to c2 check. And now he either repeats and we get a draw, or he goes to a square like h3, which it just looks ugly. It looks very ugly. There are a lot of tactics, a lot of possibilities here. I can just bring back my bishop. Now his rook is pinned. There are ideas of f5 in the future, and this is just a better position for me. Of course, if he blocks with the rook, then I'm very happy to trade rooks. Now the material is equal, and I should be able to draw the game. But instead, I rushed it a little bit, and I went bishop to c6. And this is actually the losing blunder. This was a very, very bad mistake, and that's where he told me, look, here, until the bishop trade, you played very, very good. You put me in time trouble. You should have kept pieces on the board, and maybe you were able to do something. And but after this bishop to c6, he just took the bishop, I took with the rook, and here I missed this idea d7. I thought that I would maybe have rook to d6, but then he queens with check, I captures, and then he captures with check. And then, he's just up a rook, completely winning, because I cannot take his rook. And on the other hand, after this d7 move, I just don't have any other move that can stop the promotion of the pawn. So here I went for rook to c1 check, He went king h2, I went rook to c2 check. Of course, queen to e2 check does not do anything, he just blocks with the rook, and then I have no more checks. So I went rook to c2 check, and then he went rook to g2. I of course had to capture the rook as there are no other checks, and then I just checked him, and I tried to check him, maybe get him to blunder something, but in the end king a3 was played, queen f3 check, and after b3 I resigned the game and went home. I actually went home, no, like seriously, this time I went home for real. And after the game he congratulated me, he told me that I am a very good player, but I am happy with the fact that I have won his respect, and I have played a very good game up until that bishop to c6 moment here. It was a good position, it was a good game, I'm happy with it, and basically this is the story of how I won the respect of a candidate master. Again, his rating is 2131, so you should appreciate this game as much as I do, and hopefully you can learn from it as much as I learned from it. So anyways guys, I will see you in the next video covering the craziest game that I played in this tournament, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. See you guys in the next one. Kowalski out.